Quixote Culminating project. My question that I will be addressing in the following PowerPoint reads, to what extent does man need to fit society's norms for survival? You can find it as number 3 on the handout that Ms. Robbins gave us. I'd like to start with an overview of both Don Quixote and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Don Quixote was written by Miguel Cervantes, and it was first published in 1605. He wrote it for it to be very popular around the world and as well as Spain. We know that he was successful in this because we're reading it now, and it's been repeated in history and read over and over in history for years and hundreds of years afterwards. But let's move into the actual story. Don Quixote was a middle-aged man who lives in La Mancha, Spain. Now, to my understanding, Miguel Cervantes also wanted Don Quixote to be somewhat of a comedy. So to say that you're a knight from La Mancha, Spain is a joke in and of itself. He lives with his niece and his housekeeper, and he's going kind of crazy. Not so much crazy, but he has a vivid imagination because he reads lots of stories about knights and things of that nature. And so his niece and his housekeeper live with him to keep him not so much sane, but they live with him to stay checking up on him and whatnot. Now, Don Quixote goes out on adventures with his squire, Sancho Panza. Now, I put squire in quotations because he isn't a real knight, so there isn't a real squire. But he promises Sancho Panza, who is just a neighbor in their community, that he will give him an island for his troubles or for being Don Quixote's squire. Don Quixote rides his horse Rocinante, which is a mirror of Don Quixote himself because the horse is skinny and it is old and it's working way more than it should be, just like Don Quixote. And Sancho Panza rides on a donkey whose name is El Burro, which literally means the donkey, which is yet again another joke that we already see just from the introduction of the characters and where they live. But like I said earlier, Don Quixote is lost in stories / daydreams, and he sees things that aren't really there. So that can be, as I continue on the PowerPoint, we can see that that can be kind of a dangerous thing. Now I'd like to move on to Walter Mitty, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty overview. It was a short story written by in the New Yorker in 1939. Now, it's a short story, but it follows many of the same lines as Don Quixote, dealing with a man who daydreams a lot or is caught up in his own little fantasies. Now, and for Walter Mitty, the man is just a man who's driving to town to go run errands for himself and his wife. Now, he has a series of vivid daydreams that he has, and that's just to escape, I suppose, his environment. Now, there's many things in his environment that sparks these daydreams. Now, he was driving too fast, and his wife said, hey, why are you driving too fast? And that sparked his imagination to him being a commander of a Navy hydroplane. His wife told him to put on his gloves, and he drove past a hospital, and this gave him a vivid dream or daydream that he was a surgeon in a life-saving operation. And then he was out walking to get whatever it was that he needed to get, which was actually the puppy biscuits, and the newspaper boy was screaming about the Waterbury trial. Now that's in reality, but in his dream it sparked a dream of him being a murderer in a courtroom, and he was there, and you can just see how it all connects to what's happening in reality to what he starts to dream about. And also, he was sitting down and he picked up a magazine, the Liberty magazine, that read, "Can Germany conquer the world through air?" And that sparked his imagination to get him into a dream of being a pilot of a plane going on a suicide mission, and it was just it was just a scene, and finally at the end he was just standing against the wall smoking, and that's really what was just happening, but he's got such a vivid imagination that he imagined that he himself was standing in front of a firing squad. For those that don't know, a firing squad is a capital punishment, and it's just basically what happens when the government would order someone to be killed, and a firing squad would be someone that was there just to kill someone. It's an old practice. Now, I'd like to address whether or not Don Quixote and Walter Mitty actually do fit society's norms. Don Quixote. It's an earlier time period, so it's kind of hard to compare whether or not he does fit society's norms. I know you and I both didn't live in the 1600s, and I don't know how much we know about the society and norms of the 1600s, so it's hard to compare. But to be honest, not really. Men don't go around pretending to be knights, so he didn't, if you had to look at it in hindsight, retrospect, he didn't fit society's norms. That's just not something you did, especially if you were pretending. As for Walter Mitty, 1939, it's easier to compare, but still I wasn't alive at this time, but we just know more about society then. So he fit society's norms just by being a man out doing what it was that he was doing. But he just had a vivid imagination. That's all that happened. He just imagined things and he had daydreams. Everybody has daydreams. But he was still running his errands and he still managed to get real things done, like get the puppy biscuits and do everything that his wife asked him to do. So yes, they did. Or Walter Mitty fit the norms, not so much Don Quixote. Now, did it impact their survival? For Don Quixote, yes, it did. He could have gotten killed on multiple occasions. We see that he almost could have gotten killed with the windmills. If the windmill could have been going too fast and if he was at the right angle, I mean, so many things could happen that he could actually be killed by a windmill. That's very plausible. But he was seeing his little daydream of the monster and everything else, and he actually could have gotten killed. Again, you see with the sheep and the shepherds, the sheep could have run him over. That could have been an awful situation. He could have got killed. And the shepherds were throwing the rocks at him. I don't know about you, but rocks can kill someone. In biblical times, people got stoned. Rocks can kill people. So yes, that very much did impact Don Quixote's survival. He could have gotten killed. As for Walter Mitty, it didn't impact his survival as much. He just had little daydreams. So no, it didn't. He didn't get himself into any dangerous situations. He mostly just stared off into space and enjoyed a little daydream. But he held on to reality for what it really was. He wasn't so far gone as Don Quixote with the enchanted knight and the giants and, you name it. So for Walter Mitty, it did not impact his survival, his daydreams, not so much. As for Don Quixote, that very much could have impacted his survival. Now, my final thoughts. Do you actually have to fit to society's norms to survive? Not exactly. All humans need, scientifically speaking, is food, water, and possibly shelter. Shelter is not even completely necessary, but it is helpful. But food and water is, scientifically speaking, is what you need to survive as a human being. And what's funny is that Don Quixote actually ended up reaping benefits for being in his little daydream. So not being in the norms it was a bad thing because he got into dangerous situations, but as we see in part 2 of Don Quixote, he also reaped benefits because the book that everyone was reading that was so popular, he got invited into castles and he got fed and he got housed just because everybody knew who he was. Now, of course, they were making fun of him, but nevertheless, he got food and he got shelter and he got water. So he reaped some benefits. So, do you have to fit to society's norms to survive? I'd have to say no. You don't have to entirely.